because
Okay,
there's stuff I want to talk about here. But
fair enough.
continue on. I mean,
So
I'm not going to go too deep, but
long story short, okay, this was part of my process of, because I would say if I were to describe myself currently in terms of religion or spirituality,
mm-hmm.
I would have said as a child growing up, I was very religious, but never spiritual, which is like the 180 of what everyone else ever says ever. But yeah, I went to church, I studied, I was interested in religion as a topic, as a subject, as like religious science. Like if I could have been, like, if I could have gone to college and become like a biblical scholar, that might have been pretty cool for me. But in terms of a spiritual relationship with a higher power, I mean, no, I never felt that I was having some type of communion with the divine. So when
Okay, so I gotta ask questions here. So
sure.
did you did because first of all, something immediately is coming to mind. The phrase, furthest the furthest thing in the world is the head to the 8 inches from the head to the heart.
Uh-huh.
And that's always been my kind of thing with religion, and really specifically looking at
Yep.
my relationship with Jesus, is that I know a lot of things up here, but I
Yep.
really when I say up here, I mean in my head. I know a lot of things intellectually, but it doesn't affect me emotionally, to specifically around like Christ's calling and things of that
Mm.
nature. So I mean, it sounds like you are identifying with that this was very heady and not very emotional.
Well, again, it's a strange situation because I'm an emotional person. I'm a very intuitive type person,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I define with my clients in practice, we'll talk about, beliefs versus thoughts and stuff like that. And I'll say, a belief is really a thought that you hold that is backed up by some type of emotional experience. So I'm saying, as far as religion is concerned, I have not had a very strong emotional experience that would back up most of my, you know, knowledge or theological knowledge about religion.
When we say emotional experience,
Yeah,
I think that can mean different things
it
to
can.
different people.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say emotional experience, what exactly is it that you were looking for that you didn't get?
Kind of like, I mean, I think the phrase I used a second ago was some sort of experience of communing with a higher power.
Okay. So communion.
Yeah,
It's feeling like that that sense that you're not in this alone.
yeah, and I mean, like, because I believe I have a very spiritual sense of communion with other humans.
Mm-hmm.
Any sense of communion with a higher power, I really have always struggled with. And so, just to like kind of like put a little bow on this that we can go back to later, my thought process or my journey kind of went like this. I'm raised Catholic, never really questioned that until I got to the point in my life where it was time to do so, right? Because I have to determine for my own. I've been, you know, going with my family and my community, but now it's time for me to go out in the world myself, and I have to figure out what I believe myself. Through that process of prayer, I have, Mormon missionaries that come into my path. I have to acknowledge the possibility that this is an answer to my prayers. Like this, I have to explore that possibility. If for me to have just said no, it couldn't possibly be that because I would know better. To me, that's not being open to the possibility, right? So
Right.
I
You
was
prayed.
open. I prayed. I asked. This is what came into my life. I had to
Right.
explore that. So I got baptized into the LDS church. I was probably a practicing member for about 2 years. I met my wife
Wow.
through the church. We got married
I didn't know that.
yeah, within the temple right here in Portland. Beautiful, beautiful place. But about a year into our marriage, like I know for me, and I think she went through something similar, and I won't speak for her. But for me, I just had to come to terms with, I'm putting a lot of effort. I'm trying to have faith, but the reality is I don't. And so at this point in time, for about 13 years now, I've not attended church. If we have to go to labels, I don't like any of them. I don't like saying I'm atheist because I don't deny the existence of God. I'm certainly not a person who's like, oh, well, I'm a healthy skeptic. I don't have that attitude. I have no ill will against, like, all of my family, all of the best people I know have very deep religious convictions that unfortunately I don't share, but I still respect and admire them for having them. So
Right.
you probably have to put me under some sort of agnostic label. But again, I don't like agnostic because everyone that's agnostic says I'm spiritual but not religious. And like I just said, it's sort of the opposite of me.
Well, there's been a whole conversation in the other podcast I run called Fade to Gray recently within the community around if you're agnostic, you're really an atheist. And we have some people who are very much on that side of the argument and others that are not. But curious though, because I'm assuming you're saying no belief for several years, what if you leave LDS, aren't you like excommunicated? Isn't it kind of cult-like that, where you can't just leave? Isn't it like you're a part of a, I don't know, coven?
That's not my experience at all.
Okay.
So I will say I remember when I moved from Washington out to Missouri, and there's an LDS, like church magazine called the Ensign. And somehow they've infiltrated the Postmaster General because I move halfway across the country, and somehow within like a month of moving, I start getting this magazine addressed to me. And it's like, who would have known? I did not forward, my address for this kind of thing. So yes, if they are aware of someone who's on the books, the church community would probably reach out to try to welcome, encourage me to come back into the fold. That hasn't happened for several years because their previous attempts were not real successful. The Catholic, my whole family is still very deeply, Catholic, and my mom still works at the Catholic school that I went to, has been working there for 25 years. She is, as entrenched in that community as possible, and so obviously she still talks about me. People still know about me, know about my sons and her grandkids, and she's showing off pictures and all that. So every time I visit her, she's like, oh, why don't you come to church with me? I'll go with my mom, see my friends and family that are there. They would love to have me back. My experience has been, if I wanted to do the whole prodigal son shtick and come back, I'd be welcomed with open arms to either church. That's been my experience.
That's good. I didn't know. I don't know the ins and outs. Yeah. I've always
now that's my experience.
Very curious.
Other people may have had very different experiences. Again, I am from Washington, not from Utah. So different places, different. There's different cultures within different parishes, different church, different stakes.
Right.
So
there's a culture. Every church has its own culture, no matter what denomination.
Right. And the ones that I've been blessed to have been a part of, ones that I think have had good cultures, and because of that good culture, I think they would welcome me back.
It's just so interesting that they were good. Like, there are people who attend really bad churches that have really, negative experiences, and yet their faith is so incredibly strong. And here we have your experience where
my faith is so
it's positive,
weak.
but you're not a fundamentalist.
Right.
You're an agnostic. So
and I guess I should say I'm sure that there are people, my grandma's probably one of them, that do worry about my soul and its eternal resting place. And all I can say is they're praying for me, and I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what I told my grandma, because my grandmother, when my first son was born, she tried to influence me a little bit to get him baptized. And what I told her was she's always had strong faith, and my parents always had strong faith. And so them getting me baptized when I was an infant was them testifying and demonstrating the conviction of their faith. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely the right thing to do. In my situation, I don't have that faith and that conviction. So for me to get my son baptized, basically because like, well, what harm does it do just to get him baptized? If you don't believe, you don't believe. It's like, well, I'm sticking to my convictions, which is I don't know, and that's for my son to decide on his own. But I'd be like, hey, well, we got you baptized. You can do what you want, but we've already taken care of your soul cleansing. Like original sin, we washed it away, so you don't have to worry about that. Whatever you do, that's not me being consistent. That would be being the opposite of what they were when they got me baptized because of their conviction.
Right.
And she sort of bought that. At least she stopped bothering me about it. The other conversation that I had with my grandma about this was because there was a priest who was pastor at St. Francis and St. Pat's for several years, Father Kevin, and he kind of had his like yearly rotations of the homilies, right? So every year at like a certain time of year, he'd kind of pull this one out. I don't remember exactly, but it was something to the gist of there was like a doctor that was working with a priest on a mission in Africa. And, obviously the priest was a missionary and trying to convert the people. And the doctor was an atheist and said, I didn't believe in God. And they'd have all these conversations, but the doctor was, working to cure the sick and all of that kind of good stuff, save lives and, change things there. And on the doctor's deathbed, the priest came in and said, hey, I'm going to do last rites for you. And the doctor says, even after all of our talks and all our time together, and even as I'm here on my deathbed, I still don't know if I can bring myself, to believe in God. And the priest goes, that's okay. He believes in you. And so I reminded my grandma of that and said, hey, maybe that's my hope and my prayer, and that's what I'm putting, all of my salvation eggs into that basket.
Well,
but that's about the best I can do.